I like to start out as usual by thanking everyone for posting their questions and making this video possible. Let's begin. There's been some reporting around Lorenzo Tripodi in recent times. Did you have any interactions with similar New Jersey associates, given your friendship with Joe Perna? As most people know by now, Tripodi was an associate of Johnny Perna. As for Joe Perna, from what I've seen, he didn't have too many associates. I met an Irish guy named Mike and another guy named Anthony, who was actually an associate of the Gambinos. But other than that, I never met any other associates of his. If there was one thing you could say to Vicamuso after his 90th birthday, what would it be and why? I'd have one word for him, and that would be repent. And the reason being is at 90 years of age, he can view the finish line. And speaking of Vic, if Vicamuso and Gaspipe Casso never were apprehended, how many more members would have been falsely labeled for other reasons and then killed? Do you think they would have stopped? I honestly wouldn't be able to say. But a good gauge is that labeling people was their MO, so I'm sure it would have continued. How do the five families view the De Cavalcante family, and do they respect them? I personally had no dealings with them, but I'm sure other people who did treated them with respect. What I find strange is another viewer left a comment under that question saying that they're viewed as the minor league. So I'm extremely curious how this person would know that. Who are some of the most non-obvious, interesting people you met in life? I could think of one, and for me, he was one of the most unassuming guys, and that was Gary Midori, a Lucchese member. If you met Gary, you would never make him out to be a wise guy, but his demeanor matched his look. He was really a nice guy, and may he rest in peace. If two blood brothers were to get into a fight, and one brother was a made member, would the brother who's not face retribution from the mob, or would they stay out of it? It's a good question, and an incident such as that should always remain between family members. In this scenario, it's between two brothers, and that's where it should be left. It's none of the mob's business. Did you ever meet Stevie Crea Jr.? If so, what was your opinion of him? I've met Stevie Jr. on several occasions and felt he was a nice guy. He's known as the apple that fell next to the tree. Unlike the one that rolled away, the other brother, who's known as an imbecile. Do most wise guys keep a criminal defense attorney on retainer, or do they wait until they're indicted to hire a lawyer? Also, is there any way for a wise guy to ensure they have money to cover their bail in case the government seizes their assets? Some guys, especially those prone to legal trouble, do keep a lawyer on retainer, but most will hire one when they get indicted. As for bail, it pays to be nice to your in-laws. In the event your assets are seized and you didn't funnel money away elsewhere, it's family that you'll depend on. Are Shelved members banned from going to particular restaurants that active members frequent? If they entered a restaurant where members were dining, would there be tension? What would happen if he approached the table with members? In the past, you've used the term mob leper. All right, I'll work in reverse. I mentioned mob leper because as a Shelved member, technically you're supposed to be ostracized. However, depending on who the Shelved member is, I don't believe there would be any issue if he ended up in the same restaurant with other members. In some instances, guys feel bad when someone gets shelved, especially if they feel it's unwarranted. Back in 1970, Joe Colombo was the spokesperson for the Italian American Civil Rights League. Fast forward to today, do you think there's any made guys currently doing something similar and appearing on social media, YouTube, etc., telling mob stories, trying to make everyone look left while they shuffle right? What I can say is there are no active wise guys on YouTube. Anyone who would attempt it would be shelved. And that's not to say that members don't have Instagram, X, etc. accounts. They shouldn't. And depending on who their boss is, most would be banned from social media. I've said this numerous times before. What you do is a reflection of your family. So if you're on YouTube or some other platform acting like you're Joe Rogan, you make your family look like a minor league team. In that life, notoriety brings nothing good. So if you think you're fooling anyone, you may shuffle right into an indictment. If a made man has a legitimate source of income and gets locked up, does he get to keep his legitimate business? Of course he does. Nobody's going to take his business from him. Where he would fall into a problem is if he's convicted and sentenced. He would lose his business if he didn't make accommodations for someone to look after it. Do you think that a legitimate co-op version of the mob could eventually evolve as illegal activities bring too many problems? I believe we're seeing the mob head in that direction more and more, as they're limited in illegal ways to make money. Is the Irish mob still a force to be reckoned with? If so, are they aligned with Cosa Nostra? As far as I know, the last Irish mob to be associated to the mob, specifically the Gambino family, were the Westies. And I really don't know if they still exist anymore. One viewer wanted to know what would have happened if Paul Castellano didn't get killed. When I requested that he be more specific, he answered his own question and stated he would have went to prison like everyone else. And that's correct. Castellano was facing several indictments, including the commission indictment, and more likely than not, would have went to prison. Why did Totorina want to kill Gotti for killing Paul, considering he would be better off with a new boss who was okay with drug dealing? Also, did Gotti have to get approval from the Cherry Hill Gambinos before he took Paul out? To start with, Totorina wanted to kill Gotti because he killed the boss, but more importantly, he liked Castellano because when he sent Rosario Naimo to America, Castellano welcomed him and allowed the Sicilian faction to essentially answer to Naimo, who wasn't a member of the Gambinos, but a member of the Sicilian mafia. So when he heard of Castellano's death, he was furious. Riina felt that he had to return the respect and avenge Castellano's death. Consequently, Naimo and Paolo Laduca had to fly to Sicily and explain that Castellano's death was an American problem. As for drug dealing, Totorina did as he pleased, so it didn't matter who was the boss of the Gambino family. And John Gotti didn't need approval from the Cherry Hill Gambinos to take Castellano out. Here's an email question. You mentioned that Sideburns didn't have to pay Avellino the money for the watch. How did he get away with going against Matty's ruling? The reason is because Joe Caridi gave Carmine, I think, $150 towards the watch and said that he would be paying the money for Sideburns, who didn't have it. Carmine must have got embarrassed because Caridi one time was the consigliere, and he never mentioned the money ever again. The only way Matty would know Sideburns didn't pay was if Carmine told him, which he didn't do. Please remember to like this video if you haven't already. And for anyone who wants to show appreciation for videos like this or help keep this podcast going, you can do so by the Super Thanks icon down below or the PayPal Cash App links in the video's description. I'll end with another email question. I know you know who put out the false news regarding the death of Bobby Manna. What's your take? Well, I'm not going to discuss anyone who put that information out. But what I can say is, over the years, I've had viewers message me telling me that people died. One being Lorenzo Menino, which when I checked it out, obviously wasn't true. All disinformation. And I like to give people the benefit of the doubt and say they're just repeating something they heard. But unfortunately, you have nefarious people who hope I put out false information so they could turn around and point the finger at me. In this instance, several viewers mentioned Manna's death and asked me to speak about it. I usually would never do that without checking first. Nevertheless, it'll be the very last time that something like this will happen. I have to take responsibility, and that was on me for making an amateur mistake. But from this point on, anyone who wants to message me about someone dying, you'll have to go to the wake and take a picture of the person in the coffin first